Hey there folks, Wrel here. In the background you'll see some gameplay from various titles as I share some thoughts on better gaming. In fighting games, you rarely see classes. You don't pick the strong character, the fast character, or the wrestling character. You pick Ryu or Ken or Zangief. Characters have always been a great way to create templates for very specific movesets, as well as allow for stories and styles and themes to be attached to them. Then you look at some MMORPGs like World of Warcraft, where your character is more of a generic class and race combination, but you also have access to unique characters in the form of important NPCs. You may play a Night Elf Druid, but Malfurion is the Night Elf Druid. He's a character that's elevated to the status of an icon, or of a hero. And one big difference is that a class allows a player to be somewhat generic, because especially in an MMORPG, your rogue may look completely different one day to the next, and it can never really be iconic for the same reasons. Character icons or character classes have been a part of gaming for a long time, but they're becoming increasingly popular in genres where we wouldn't normally see them, like in FPSs. Team Fortress 2 is probably one of the first FPS games I'd credit with really using characters over classes, and while you still play the soldier, you still play the engineer or the scout, which are very generic names, the characters themselves have taken on their own lives, thanks to having unique silhouettes and voices and interactions with one another alongside their weapons and abilities. I think one of the reasons why we've been seeing more games focus on character icons over traditional classes is that there's just so much competition out there right now that you have to create characters that players can immediately fall in love with. Overwatch is a great example of this. You create characters that are compelling, that have a life of their own, maybe mirror some of the traits that players identify with in themselves. Compelling characters stick. It's also very interesting to see the long-standing Call of Duty franchise taking some bold steps towards using characters over classes as well, because COD tends to be pretty good about fleshing out characters in single-player campaigns, but you are always that faceless guy with a gun in the multiplayer. As an example, in Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, you're yet again another guy or gal with a gun, and there are plenty of customization options, but it all blends together. Then you look at Call of Duty Black Ops 3, and you're a specialist. It has their own backstory, they have their own personality, their own abilities, and their own interactions with whoever else is on the team. And keep in mind that your multiplayer specialists are not a part of the single-player campaign in Black Ops 3. You can't play them, you can't interact with them, they're not characters that were just ported over to the multiplayer, and yet, by giving them unique stylings and voices and abilities, they quickly feel recognizable and unique. Treyarch could have just as easily added a slot for a special ability or a special weapon, and then stuck with the traditional FPS mindset. Functionally, the gameplay would be pretty similar provided you message who has what abilities. But there's so much benefit that you gain by allowing players to align themselves with the character icon that I'd be really interested to see how many future games refuse to fall in line with this trend. My prediction is that we'll see more of these character icons and not less. Creating compelling characters is how you differentiate games like Paladins from Battleborn, Battleborn from Paragon, all of which are third-person MOBA-style games, but Battleborn has been doing a crazy good job at giving their unique characters a presence of their own. If you've seen any of the commercials, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Outside of being able to market your game better and being able to give players a feeling of connection to a character, which depends a lot on how you develop a character in the first place, there's also a huge gameplay benefit that we can't leave unmentioned, and that's character recognition. The only reason you're able to keep track of 120 some odd League of Legends characters is because they're all unique to one another. But imagine if the characters were only cosmetic. Imagine if their abilities could be interchanged between them. You wouldn't be able to really recognize exactly who's going to have which ult or which abilities, and while it makes for a pretty fun game mode in Heroes of Newerth, it's not something that you can play competitively. Being able to have that sort of character recognition allows you to create more characters as well, since we can more easily associate and remember abilities of characters who are unique, characters who stand out. The quickened learning process gives us the opportunity to add more to the game without drastically increasing the learning curve. That being said, all games definitely do not need character icons, either as someone you can play or an NPC you can play alongside, because we can't all be heroes, and in games where you really need to play as someone who is a little bit more generic to maintain the authenticity of the experience, I know that sounds ironic, classes will always make a lot more sense. If you do want to integrate character classes into your game though, I think there are a couple of considerations that absolutely need to be taken into account. In my opinion, the biggest part of creating a good character is giving it a reason to exist. If one character is too similar to another or doesn't bring anything new to the table, then there's really no point in adding it at all. You see this to greater or lesser degrees in MOBAs because they tend to have so many characters in the first place. There are only so many ways you can throw a single point charge attack into the game before the ability gets pretty stale. But if you can mix it with enough new mechanics, then it can still feel like a fairly fresh experience. Once a character has a reason to exist, you can then focus on bringing it to life. That can come through the visual design, the audio feedback, as well as the lore and interactions it'll have with other characters. For example, Overwatch has a character named Zarya who is not only big and burly, which helps represent her role as a tanky character, but she also talks a lot to Reinhardt and has a distrust of Omnix, both of which help pull the player into the game's world a little bit more. In games where you're trying to inject character icons that are not playable, example being our earlier mention of Malfurion from World of Warcraft, you rely more on the lore and less on the character's role, and then you need to leave it up to the player to uncover that lore for themselves, either through brief interactions with that character or throughout their gameplay experience. Giving a player time to develop their own connections with the character and with the story will help enrich the experience without detracting from the gameplay at the same time. If this video has been interesting, helpful, or entertaining, please feel free to like, subscribe, tell your friends about the channel, and if you have any thoughts on character icons and when or how they should be used in today's games, if at all, go ahead and leave those thoughts in the comments section down below. Thanks very much, folks. Wrel signing off.
Enemy turret destroyed.
From the shadows.
Payload secured. Move out. Hey there.
Positioning.
Move the payload. Move the payload.